Good morning. Well, I've had 82 degrees in Los Angeles and 5 degrees in Oklahoma, and so you know I'm very happy to be back in the trade winds. You have all kinds of weather in a very short space over there on the mainland, and this season they seem to be having extremes. When you think of religious teachings and activities, it is a very important thing to go beyond what seems to be the teachings in books and search the lives of the mystics who brought forth these religious teachings and study as much as possible their lives and their experiences and the experiences that they brought to their immediate followers. Because in these lives and experiences of the mystics, you have the actual principles upon which the experiences were founded. Whereas if you read the later writings or try to follow the later teachings, you will find, as a general rule, that the original principles have been omitted. There are probably many different reasons for this, but the fact remains that it is so. If we individually knew our true identity, there would be no such thing as a personal problem, and there would be very few problems of a collective nature, and those few would be readily solved. You see, we would never be in existence if there weren't a creative principle, if there weren't a something that sent us forth into expression. We cannot be like Topsy. We just can't grow. There has to be a principle of life. There has to be a something. Whether we call it God or whether we call it a creative principle, by whatever name we identify it, there must be a recognition that we are the effect of something, that we are the product of something, that there is a something that sent us forth in its own nature. In other words, it could only have manifested as its very own nature. In other words, just as our orange trees can only show itself forth as oranges, and our apple trees can only show themselves forth as apples, so could the creative principle of life show itself forth only in its own qualities, with its own qualities, character and nature. And therefore, it becomes so important, first, that we recognize that there is a something, a principle, a law, a life, a being, and that we are the product of this. And then that as the product of the great cause, we are in nature all that that cause is. Now, this leads us up to the realization, revelation if necessary, of our true identity. And just to use an illustration that appears often in our writings, we may take the tree and its branches and perceive that all that a branch is really the product of the tree as a whole. Also, that the branch does not have to struggle or strive in order to bear fruit, in order to blossom, in order to be fruitful. It has only to stand still, only to stand still in being and let whatever the nature of the tree is be manifest as the branch. In other words, this breaks down the possibility of a branch saying, I should do this, I can do this, I ought to do this. It breaks down that sense of I and enables it to realize that the I, the identity, the source, is really the full tree and not any one part of the tree. It would be just as wrong for a branch or for the trunk of the tree or for the roots of the tree to use the word I. It is only the tree as a whole that can be called tree. And then each part of the tree must rest in that realization that it exists as tree. Now, you'd be surprised the change that takes place in an individual once they realize that they have their existence not as a branch separate from the tree, but as a branch that is part of the tree, and that the life of the branch is nothing more nor less than the life of the tree itself. Moses is the first of those in our particular religious world to reveal this nature of I. As you know, for many years he had been with the flocks out on the hills, had spent years in retrospection, in meditation, in contemplation, and on what is described as the mountaintop, or evidently a height of consciousness, the secret is revealed within himself. I am. I am. In other words, instead of an individual walking the earth, he is actually of the very life, of the very being, of the creative principle of the earth. In other words, there is no Moses separate and apart from God. Whatever Moses is in and of God, and therefore with no responsibility on his own shoulder except the responsibility of resting back in the consciousness of his true identity. In other words, even when he is commanded to speak and fears that he will not speak well, he is assured that that is not his responsibility. His responsibility is only to open his mouth. And there is that which will perform the function of the delivering of his message. The realization of this changed Moses from a shepherd, from an individual walking the earth, to not only a leader, but the leader of his race, and enabled him to make the delivery from slavery to freedom, But now watch as you follow the career of Moses from the time that he receives his illumination until he delivers the people close to the promised land. In Job, we have this. There was silence, and I heard a voice. There was silence, and I heard a voice. The hearing of the voice can only come from the silence. When there is a silence within us, a silencing of I, a silencing of me, a silencing of mine, a stilling of the senses, in that silence we hear a voice. And that voice comes from within our own being. When Moses heard that voice, it said, I am that I am. It was not Moses speaking, it was Moses hearing. And yet, that which he heard came from within himself. As you study the lives of all mystics, you will find that this same experience is duplicated. That whenever a voice is heard, whenever illumination comes, whenever any spiritual unfoldment comes, it comes from within that individual. It does not come from outside, nor does it come from another. It comes from within their own being. And eventually we are led to see this, that just as I and the Father are one has been revealed to us, so do we learn that the meaning of this is that there are two depths of our own being, the surface depth and the inner depth, and that the surface depth is that which is taught, guided, led, protected, maintained, and sustained by the deeper inner self, the withinness. And remember this, because this is the important part of the realization of our true identity. We are really two in one. There is really this self of us, which is our external self, known through our human identity, and then there is this deeper inner self, which is still our self. It is not something separate and apart from us. It is not something that leaves us, for instance, when we are in sin, or when we're in disease, or when we're in poverty. It never leaves us. It is always there. It is only that in the human life as we have lived it for generations, dozens of generations, in which we have learned to live through our outer senses, we have actually lost contact with that inner self, that inner being, that inner law, and we have sought our good in the external. It is only really in times of trial, in times of temptation, in times of deep experiences, that we learn to, like the prodigal son, pick ourselves up, turn around, and go back to the Father's house. But going back to the Father's house is not a journey in time or space. Going back to our Father's house is a return to our inner self, that which we call the Father within me, which Paul called the Christ in me. But regardless of the name we give it, it is our self, spelled with a capital S. Now, the first important factor in this realization is this: that we no longer need to search outside of ourselves for our salvation, our safety, our security, our justice, our freedom, or whatever it may be that temptation is causing us to doubt or fear. In other words, man whose breath is in his nostril cannot give us what we are seeking. Man whose breath is in his nostril cannot take from us that which is our God-given heritage. Now, according to worldly standards, we can receive our good from or through man whose breath is in his nostril, and also we can receive our injury, our slavery, injustice, inequalities, all of this we can receive from man whose breath is in his nostril, but it isn't true. And the realization of our true identity immediately frees us from this generations-long belief that man whose breath is in his nostril can either benefit us or harm us. And now we come to the realization that within me is the issue of life. Within me are the powers of life. Within me rests safety, security, peace, justice, harmony, equality, freedom, ultimately, freedom from these worldly beliefs which cause our daily discords. For an individual, then, to be able to return to the consciousness of Moses, close one's eyes to the outer world, enter a silence, and receive assurance from within. And in some form, it will be revealed to us that I am with you. Not separate or apart from you. I am. God is with you, within you. That the place whereon thou standest is holy ground, and that none of the evils of this world shall come nigh thy dwelling place. For remember, thy dwelling place is God. You are dwelling in the realization of the Father within. You are dwelling in the realization of your oneness with your source, here and now, where I am, sitting here or standing there or flying there. Where I am, God is, not separate and apart, but here and now. This realization even separates you from the religious superstitions which would make it appear that there is a God somewhere, or if you can please God, that good will follow. If you can sacrifice, if you can be good, if this or if that, whereas the truth is that God is no respecter of persons or of circumstances, that God's rain falls on the just and on the unjust. And actually, all Scripture reveals that in that moment of turning, in that moment of the prodigals turning back to the Father's house, in that moment of repent ye, turn ye and live, in that very moment the human past is wiped out with its history, and this principle of life which is within us begins instantly to function. Now you must understand this, that only the superstitions of ancient pagans has sent down into the centuries this teaching of God separate and apart, or a God that judges as to good and evil, or a God who withholds rain from the unjust, or a God who causes one to suffer because of our wrongs, our pasts. All of this is pagan superstition, whereas the truth is that our sufferings last only as long as we persist in living the life of the prodigal. While we live the life of the prodigal, separate and apart from God, we are then under the law of cause and effect, the law of as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And while we are living in that human world, it pays that we never forget that as we sow, so shall we reap. That what we set in motion today, we certainly bring home to roost tomorrow. And there is no avoiding this, except in the realization of our true identity, we are enabled to turn ye and live, repent and be saved, or return to the Father's house. The language is of no importance. The main thing is the realization of our true identity. Now, can you not see that if we live the life of a branch separate and apart from the tree, that a great deal of our life is spent in concern, anxiety, fear, doubt, worry for tomorrow, and even in manipulating this world to try to make it turn out good for us, and that in the moment that we realize that I and the Father are one, that within me is the source of my life, the bread, the meat, the wine, the water, that from that moment on I can lose concern for the outer world and not use the weapons of the world for my welfare. Those who live by the sword, we're told, die by the sword. In other words, those who use the weapons of this world are in time destroyed by the weapons of this world. Those who use the cunning, the scheming, the powers of this world end up destroyed by that. And yet also we learn that this can be made to cease in any moment. The experience of the prodigal can be ended in any moment. The life of the woman taken in adultery can be ended in any moment. The life of the thief on the cross can be ended in any moment when there is an inner recognition of the presence that is within each and every individual. In any moment, any of us may realize I and the Father are one. The branch is one with the tree, and the wholeness of the tree is the fulfilling of every branch. And then resting and relaxing from our human mode of life, resting and relaxing from our human worries, doubts, fears, anxieties, even resting from human planning, we find then that there is a something within us that comes forth to bring into our experience the spiritual energies, the spiritual faculties, and the spiritual functions of life. In other words, there is an invisible presence that goes before us. There is an invisible power that takes over and does things for us that we ourselves could never do. As a matter of fact, this that is within us becomes evident in the experience of those with whom we come in life all the way through. A man just on this last trip said to me that he has found not only the change in his own experience through this realization, but that the people with whom he does business seems to have responded to this within himself, and he receives different treatment than he formerly did. He receives different reception, different response from those with whom he meets. In other words, that which is taking place in me is made evident in the consciousness of those with whom I come in contact. And this is revealed to us by the Master, where he asks, "Who am I? Who do men say that I am? Whom do ye say that I am?" And then when Peter is able to reveal, "Thou art the Christ," then the Master says, "It wasn't man or human intelligence that revealed that to you. It was the spiritual light within yourself that recognized this." But he might also have revealed that that spiritual light was only awakened by his contact with the Master. In other words, there had to be something within the Master to awaken something within Peter. And so it is. There is something within you that awakens a response within those with whom you come into contact. When we begin to perceive our true identity as tree rather than as branch separate and apart from the tree, you see how instantly we establish our relationship with every other branch on the tree, so that consciously now the same life, the same consciousness, the same awareness, the same love that is flowing through us is found to be flowing through every branch of the tree. And this brings every branch into harmony with every other branch by reason of that central life of the tree. See this. The life of the tree is actually the life of every branch. Therefore, every branch has the same life, the same love, the same mind, the same source, the same feeding, the same substance, the same activity. And then you can see how it is that my conscious oneness with God constitutes my oneness with all spiritual being and idea. My conscious oneness with my source constitutes my oneness with you. Your conscious oneness with your source constitutes your oneness with every member of your family, or every member of your business, or every member of your office, or every member of your social life. In other words, you then live actually as you are in spirit, one with each other, and not by virtue of relationship with each other, but by virtue of that conscious realization of oneness with the central life. The moment you realize the presence of God within you is the source and activity of your life, and you carry it the next step, the divine life that is within you is also the life, the mind, the soul, the spirit, the consciousness of every individual with whom you come in contact. You quickly discern that you are now living as harmoniously with the people of this world as every branch of the tree is living harmoniously with every other branch on that tree. The realization of this identity enables us to relax from concern about a future, for the simple reason now we are the branch of the tree, one with the tree, and its function is to assume the responsibility for our individual welfare. And yet, we never stray from the realization that this central life of the tree is really the life that is within me. Always remember this. This life that is within me is the same life that is within you. It is one life. Never separate and apart from you, never having to come to you. And you do not have to wait to earn it or deserve it. You do not have to wait for its benefits until you have read so many books or until you have reformed your human life. You do not have to wait until you obtain some standard of human perfection. In any instant in which you recognize that God is within you, I and the Father are one, here where I am, in that very instant you have started the process. And then you do not have to reform, you do not have to change your way of thinking. This realization of the presence within does it for you. It removes from you not only the sin, but the capacity to sin. It removes not only wrong thinking, but even the capacity to think erroneously. So that it is not a psychological process of changing your way of thinking. It is a spiritual process of having your way of thinking purged and changed and renewed by the activity of a presence within that is now realized. Now let me make this point to you, that the presence is within us at every period of our existence, whether we're in the midst of disease or death or poverty or sin. That presence is there. The only reason it is not functioning is that there can be no functioning of anything in our experience except through our consciousness. And so, until we consciously realize this presence within, it is exactly as if it weren't there. Until we consciously relax our mental striving and rest in this assurance of withinness, it cannot function. Everything that functions in our experience must take place through our consciousness, through our conscious knowing, through our conscious awareness. That is why the Master said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." First there must be, ye shall know the truth. Now, as you know this truth, I and the Father are with us, are one. I am one with this inner being, this inner self, this inner life. All that is true of this inner life is true of my outer experience. Now, because of this inner awareness, I live not by might nor by power, but by the spirit of this presence, by the consciousness of this presence. In quietness and stillness, I find my peace. In quietness, in stillness, in assurance, inner assurance, a relaxing of the mind. We can't relax the mind, but the mind is automatically relaxed as we turn to this withinness. He that is within me is greater than any he without. The Father within me, he doeth the works. I can do all things through Christ, the Christ that is within me, the Spirit of God in me. Ye need not fight. The battle is not yours. The responsibility is not on your shoulders, but on the inner grace, the inner presence. Relax. And you find that as you relax, the mind becomes still, not because you have any power to still it. Your fears dissolve, not because you have any power to still these fears or remove them, but because with this recognition, I'm not alone. I am merely bearing witness to a presence within me. I live not by might nor by power, but by an inner grace. Within me is the staff of life, that on which I can lean, rest, rely. Within me is the bread of life, the substance of my outer support. Within me is the water of life, that which bubbles up into life everlasting. Within me is the meat. The support of my being, the strength of my being. Within me. And it functions in silence, in stilling comes the silence, then the voice, the assurance, the strength, the peace. I am not alone. He that is within me is greater than all of the circumstances of our outer experience. He that is within me goes forth before me to make the crooked places straight. And I will never leave you nor forsake you. This presence within is an eternal assurance of harmony. And then there comes the periods of temptation, the periods of problems, our own or others, and it is in these moments that we face the situation as the Master did, not hiding from them, not denying them, but get thee behind me, Satan. Stop tempting me, because I'm not going to believe in these powers of personal sense. In this realization of our true identity as really the tree, there comes the destruction of what in Scripture has been called the devil, but which we recognize today to be personal sense, the I sense, me sense, my sense. This is the only devil there is, because in the degree that you perceive that there is not a separate I in every one of those branches, but that in every case it is the same I, in that sense does personal sense dissolve. And this just comes into my mind from a letter. A student wrote me for help for a daughter in some great difficulty and unwilling to even hear about such things as spiritual help. And of course, the mother had every confidence herself in the power of spiritual help, but not a conviction that her daughter could benefit by it, because her daughter wasn't turning to it or even wanting to hear anything about it. And so the mother said, "Please enlarge my faith so that I may come to see that this spiritual presence and power can embrace my daughter and her affairs. And that is why I'm writing to you, to support me in my faith." She signed the letter, and then there was a postscript. "Please forgive me. I forgot that the illumined soul to whom I am writing is the illumined soul of my daughter. For there is only one." And you see, she gained her freedom right there from personal sense, which says that her daughter was something separate from the tree and couldn't benefit by being a branch of the tree. How ridiculous this is. I am he, I am thou. And so it is, if there is a Moses, do you not see how the followers of Moses benefited by the consciousness of Moses and were thereby led into their safety and their security? And so do you not see that the moment you recognize that there is such a thing as an illumined soul, whether you call that soul Moses or whether you call that soul Jesus, do you not see you are recognizing the illumined soul which is your own self? That it would be impossible for Moses or Jesus or anyone else to have an illumined soul separate and apart from the illumined soul which is your soul, and the recognition of this separates you from the density of human animality and releases you into spiritual identity. Without knowing this, God is still the soul of you, but of no benefit until you come into the conscious awareness of this. The illumination that constituted the soul of every mystic is the soul of you. And of all of those who do not yet know and who have not yet read of their identity and of this one soul which constitutes our being, this one life which constitutes our life, this one soul, this one spirit, this one bread, this one meat, this one wine, which is mine. But in being mine is yours. And there we have one of the secrets, really, of demonstrating supply, if we may return to that outmoded metaphysical way of speech. But the moment we realize the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, we have broken down a sense of limitation within ourselves, because it is only the belief that each one of us has some measure of supply of our own, and again, this is personal sense, this limits us. In the degree that we realize the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and this Lord is the center of my being, this Lord is the center of your being, this Lord is the illumined soul of you and of me, and this is the source of supply, and therefore it's universal. And we can look at the tree then and see that every branch must have leaves, and every branch must flower, every branch must have fruit, as long as it is one with the tree. And so it is with us. As long as we maintain the consciousness of our oneness with the source of all being within, and then realize the issues of life are in that withinness, the source of supply, the source of justice, the source of mercy, the source of forgiveness, the source of love, the source of life, All of this is within me, and that me is you. Within you. Universally true, regardless of whether we may think of ourselves as followers of Moses or followers of Jesus or followers of Buddha. We are really followers of none of these. Actually, we are followers of the light which illumined each and every one of these and many more besides. And we are followers of the light because that light is within us. That light is the light of our own being. That light is the light of our own soul. And it is never further away from us than our breathing. Never further away from us than our own inner self. It is for this reason that when we face any problems at all, from the minor ones to the major ones, we do far better by sitting down somewhere in a quiet corner if we can, or even going to bed and relaxing there without words and without thoughts, relaxing completely from personal sense until a silence comes, and from the silence a voice, an assurance, a presence, a grace, a power. It will always come from within you, and it will always make itself evident in the degree of your hearing ability, your inner hearing ability, the inner stillness, the inner vacuum that you set up every time you turn within to hear that still small voice. But remember, salvation, whatever the name or nature of your problem may be, physical, mental, moral, financial, human relations, the solution is to come from within your own being, not from another. Within your own being, a silence, and I heard a voice. And when he utters his voice, the earth melteth. That is a truth beyond all belief, but it is a truth. When he uttereth his voice, this he that is within you, when he uttereth his voice, the earth melteth. It isn't a he up in the sky. It isn't a he out in some religious personality. It is a he that is within you. All that constitutes a religious personality is an individual who has attained an awareness of this in some measure. And so it is that whatever it is that you recognize as the nature of the religious personality is to be realized as the nature of your own being. And it is for this reason the Master says, if I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. As long as you persist in believing that your salvation must come through some historic spiritual personality, you will be deprived of the spiritual life that you must live today, which comes with the awareness that you and the Father within you are one, not two, but one, and that you are not trying to make contact with the Father, nor are you trying to win the Father's grace. You are relaxing and realizing its presence, and then permitting it to have a moment of your silence so that its voice may be heard within you, and yet not separate or apart from you. There is the big factor. It is so easy to fall into the temptation and believe that that which we are seeking is somewhere other than within our own being, and further than that, that it is the I of our own being. It is the very I of our own being. And it is because we can say I that we know that God is there. For God is that I, and I is that God. And these are one and I am he, and I am thou. I in the Father, and the Father in me, inseparable, indestructible, one. And in that realization of oneness is our salvation. Cease ye for a man whose breath is in his nostril, for wherein is he to be accounted of? Acknowledge him, the presence within, in all thy ways, and he will give thee rest. That where I am, ye may be also. And remember that where ye are, there I am. Thank you. Thank you.